Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady, and I am here with my co-host, JC. Hey, JC.
Wendy, it's a pleasure. How are you today?
You know what? That's a loaded question. I think you kind of asked me that a little bit, and I got to tell you, I'm burnt out. I am so burnt out. I feel like everybody's burnt out. It's, we're recording this in May, even though it's not going to go live for a little bit. But I have friends and business acquaintances and everybody just texting me and posting things on social media about burnout. So how are you feeling, JC?
Top of the world right now, to tell you the truth. I'm doing great.
That's because his other podcast, Interesting Things with JC, has just won a ton of awards. So folks, go check that out. It's a very short podcast and it is very informative and has topics from everything in the world. But with that said, we are here today with an expert in burnout recovery. So welcome to the show, Teany Hidalgo. How are you?
I am so excited to talk to you both and talk about this topic. It's like my favorite topic in the world these days. And
well,
because like you said, so many people are burnt out and they're feeling it and it's just getting worse and worse. So it's time to talk about it and do something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today as an expert in burnout recovery. You also help working women reset and reclaim their energy and humans as a whole reclaim their energy and align their careers with purpose. So how'd you get here?
Oh my gosh, loaded question. So backstory, I have been working in corporate for 24 years. And so I have been burned out probably several times, as you can imagine, in that 24-year time span. But the biggest one was in 2007 when I had to take basically a 3-month sabbatical because I was done. My back was hurting. I was traveling to work with this really heavy laptop, did not like what I was doing work, working all the time, days, sometimes evenings. It was just overwhelmed to the max times 10. So I took a few months sabbatical to basically try to figure out my life and decide what I was going to do next. And I did end up returning to corporate, but with like a new vision, right? I actually started opening my eyes to the world of wellness. And that became me turning into a massage therapist. So I actually have a medical massage therapy degree, and I'm actually starting a business here in Sedona for massage as well as a combination of massage and coaching, which helps people with burnout. Because people come here where I live right now in Sedona for relaxation and for relief and all that stuff. So that's what it's all about here. So I started getting into massage therapy and then I got into coaching and I just started realizing that the real underlying reason why I was burned out is because I didn't have a deep meaning behind the work I was doing in corporate. And so turning to wellness and really helping people on a deeper level, I don't know if you are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes. He talks about the top 4, right, are like the human needs that everyone needs, the baseline. And then the other 2 are basically your deeper meaning, your connection, your higher needs. And for me, that's what made it for me. Meaning and purpose around helping people was where I got the best and the most like gratification in my life.
I love it. You share a lot. I love your website, by the way. And I stalk you on LinkedIn as well. You share a lot about sustainable burnout relief and, how this does connect to not just life, as you just mentioned, but business and leadership. And since most of our listeners are folks in HR wearing the HR hat, managers who often have to wear the HR hat because there is an HR in that business, this is huge. I mean, like I mentioned at the start of this show is I'm hearing everybody say that they're burnt out. And I do think, without getting into politics, but it is specifically here in the United States or really across the entire earth, a lot of it is connected to politics that are going on. But, that's kind of life, that there's always that going out there. what are the first, red flags that you spot or that we can spot as leaders or as friends who care when somebody's headed towards burnout?
Oh my gosh. I did this whole presentation at when I was working for big corporate IBM, and I talked about the top 5 actually things that you will experience as you're going through burnout. And I'll just tell you real quick what they are, but I'll tell you what the smallest, how it starts. Because so the top 5 are excessive fatigue, seeking unhealthy escapes, sensitivity or mood flopping, right? Like having real sensitivity in your mood, numbness or disconnection. And then the last one is loss of spark, which is, I basically went through all of them when I went through my burnout, and loss of spark, I think, was probably the deepest one, because then you're kind of like, why am I showing up to work every day? Right.
Yeah.
But the way it starts is actually with just people feeling off, like something isn't right, right? Like why, like kind of like, why am I, before the why am I here at all, just the why am I doing this, right? The small little bits, the things that make you irritable, the little signs that everything is bothering you. That's the disconnection that people are starting to feel as it starts to go into burnout. And then it goes into those other 5, which are much bigger.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I think JC has some stats he wants to share with us.
Yeah, we could pivot a bunch of different ways here, Ms. Wendy, but I'm going to start right at the top here. 76% of employees report experiencing burnout at least sometimes, with 28% saying that they are burned out very often or always. It's a key signal for managers to make sure that they intervene early. Back to you.
Yeah, that was a great stat from Gallup, and that's huge. I mean, even if it's just 28% that says they're burned out very often or always, 28% is huge. That's a huge amount of people that are on your payroll, hopefully doing the bare minimum, but may not even be doing the bare minimum of the job, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because I always have to help people understand the difference between just being stressed out and being burnt out.
Oh,
and there is
thank
a difference.
you. Yeah, explain that.
Yeah, so burnout is kind of like depression. Depression doesn't just happen, right? Depression is sadness and all, everything that goes along with the emotions of it over a prolonged period of time. Same with burnout. Burnout is not just one stressful event and suddenly you're burned out. Burnout is actually stressful times over a long period of time, probably months, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I try to actually deter people from doing is actually saying and labeling themselves as burnt out, because then they start taking on all the emotions and aspects, physical and everything else that goes along with it. What if you're just stressed out in the moment? That's okay. You know what? That's actually part of life. It's actually normal. And, that's when we need to start addressing it, because that's sign number 1, right? Now, if you let it go on over months and months and months, then you're going to get even more signs, right? You're going to go through the physical symptoms and the mental, emotional symptoms, and then it becomes burnout over time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. No, I was so going to ask that actually, because I've been thinking about that a lot, just because everybody's using the burnout word. And I think some people are just stressed and they're not used to it. Where many other people are used to stress all the time, but now they're like, I can't handle it anymore, because the people that are calling me saying they're burnt out and they're over it and they're ready to quit their job, I'm like, whoa, just a few months ago, you told me that was the most amazing job ever. And I know these people personally, and I know they can handle a lot of stress. So thank you for explaining that. Let me switch gears here a little bit and talking about, managers. How do you coach employees or just humans or their managers, or maybe it's their spouse or their family members? But in this case, let's talk about the workplace. How do you catch employees, that are burnt out before it gets too messy and they've got a foot out the door?
Oh, you're speaking my language. These are great questions. So, oh my gosh, when I was in Big Corp, one of the things I did, I was actually a team lead, and I would meet up with my smaller team, right? Without the managers there, actually. And so one thing I would say, I love managers so much, but sometimes you're not full and solely responsible for the mental wellness of your entire team. You actually have to delegate some of that to the other people on the team, like team leads and other folks. And one thing that I really would love to happen is some kind of buddy system where you actually get two employees together and they, connect with each other every other week or something like that. In my case, I met up with my smaller team and there was no agenda. It was like an open door, like, hey guys, just what's going on? How are your projects coming along? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you exhausted? Are you burnt out? Is there anything, that's going on with the people that you're working for, our clients? What can we do for you? And then I would be the one reporting to my boss and getting more insight or whatever the case is. But it doesn't always necessarily have to happen at that level. It can actually happen and they're more open when it's amongst the peers. Because I was basically a peer, right? A team lead. I'm still a peer, technically. I'm not a boss. So they were able to share more. And I think that's the biggest thing in corp, that people don't feel comfortable sharing their dirty laundry, right, to the boss. They would rather share it across peers. And that's just, having a buddy system or smaller groups every other week or even once a month, just such an immense help.
Employees who take regular breaks, they're 43% more likely to have high levels of resilience and productivity, making micro breaks a powerful low-effort buffer against being overwhelmed. And Wendy, you had some stats about best friends in the workplace too, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. This is from Gallup, where employees with a workplace best friend are 36% more likely to say that they feel connected to the company and 27% more likely to report thriving overall. So supporting buddy systems as a buffer against burnout is an awesome tool that you can use. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, that's basically what I was just saying. First of all, I love Gallup. Gallup just had, that's probably the research you just found. They just put out a bunch of research on what's going on in the workplace. But yeah, buddy systems, having a best friend. I mean, I know people who don't really like what they do, but they stay because of the environment there.
Yep.
If the environment is conducive to you leading a better, more balanced life, then it's much easier for you to stay rather than maybe even having like a really meaningful, purposeful job that's really stressful, right? Like there's a balance in there somewhere. So there has to be a balance at work. And sometimes it has to be just a buddy. A buddy will do it for you.
Yeah, so absolutely. It's so important, folks that are listening, to make sure that regardless if you're in person or remote, if you're stressed or not, people are burnt out or not, new, been there forever, you need to be focusing on team building. And in fact, on Aurora Training Advantage, we have team building trainings. In fact, I'm the trainer. We just did one on in-person team building, how to, pull that off. And then we will also be doing one shortly on remote workplaces as well. So tune into that. Check out the Aurora Training Advantage website, because we're going to give you some more ideas on how to build that team building, how to get that workplace best friend, which again is different than a real best friend, but it's the people we rely on when things go tough, that we're, grabbing that coffee with, that we're might be complaining about work with, but they make you stay. They make you come back the next day because why? Because I don't want to let my best friend down. So I'm going to come back tomorrow, even though I'm having a really hard time, and I'm going to do that instead of putting in my resignation notice, or worse than the resignation notice is they just don't come back.
And if I can add one more thing to that, that whole belly system, managers can do a much better job also of understanding their employees. There's so many tests and things, personality tests, Enneagrams. There's a plethora of things that you can do in a workplace environment to understand the employees better, and that will help you connect the right people together. So if they form a buddy system, they can find the right people that work, more synergistically together and can really support each other versus people who are going to be butting heads. So
yeah, absolutely. And just be careful you're not forcing friendships. They usually happen naturally. But again, when you're doing some team building, things might come out like, oh, you got a puppy? I got a puppy. I got a cat? You got a cat. I got kids? You got kids, or whatever. I like the same baseball team. You don't have to be true best friends with your buddies at work, but it is definitely helpful. And for those of you that are new at management that are listening to this, we also have some training on how to go from buddy to boss. Even though I can't stand the word boss, I do have a system myself that uses, HR like a real boss. So let's just face it, people do call us the bosses if we like it or not. All right, I want to shift gears, but stay on the same topic and talk about culture. So not just department, so not just, what you as a manager can do, but how HR leaders and managers can kind of bake into their culture, lack of better word, sustainable well-being. How do we bake that into our everyday workflow so it's not just, once a year checkbox, HR made me do this, or a fancy perk. Talk to me a little bit about what that even means about being sustainable when we're ensuring that our employees feel well and not burnt out on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. The previous perks of coffee hours and pizza parties, that stuff's over, right? We're way past that as a mental wellness break or whatever you want to call it. We need to start really creating I call it a culture of care. And creating a culture of care isn't just one thing. It's creating the buddy systems, right? It's really understanding your employee system. It's really understanding like what turns them on, right? Like the whole love languages thing, it's a thing for the workplace too, right? Like understanding what their love language is in the office. For example, maybe they do want an extra day off. Maybe that's a thing for them. Or maybe they want, higher pay or a better position. Or maybe they just want a really great environment where you actually care to talk with them once a week, right? Like there's just so many elements of creating a culture of care. It's not just one thing. It's figuring out the dynamics of the team according to the dynamics of each individual. So, but for me, it's all about creating that culture of, I actually care about you. It's not just about the bottom dollar, right? It's not just about you doing and finishing that project on time or before it's done, right? It's actually about caring about the person and each individual and how they collaborate together, if that makes sense.
Organizations that embed well-being into their culture are 2.6 times more likely to report outstanding organizational outcomes, including talent retention and performance. Couple questions for you. So when we're thinking about that organizational change and we start to embed and, quote, bake in well-being into our culture, yeah, we're going to have a period of transition. Yeah, we might have to rebrand a little bit. But when we're thinking from the mindset of that leader or the executive core, rising above even just managers, people that are thinking strategically about the organization, could you just pin in for me real quick on how we could capitalize on messaging our new brand that might be baked into a realm of well-being? Have you seen effective change with companies or organizations that do that?
So you're talking about like at the top levels, the C-suite level?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's honestly rare that I have seen the C-suite actually discuss this. Sometimes it comes from the bottom up and then it comes back down kind of thing, right? So people at the bottom are talking about, how can create a better culture, like I was saying before. And so as we were moving up, I remember having one boss who really even talked about her own, like, not that this is necessary per se, but talked about her own personal life in terms of having a family and going on vacations. And like, basically, I think from the top down, we need to talk about how they actually have lives and they're real people, right? They're not just leading and running the show. They're actually people who have, their days off, right? Who are sick sometimes, have kids, and who take vacations. And that's really what I think needs to happen from the top down, that it's not just mandates and tasks and percentages and things that the company has to do, but actually, and this year we're going to, I'm going to go on this vacation, and hey, I really recommend that you guys take 2 weeks off, and don't wait till the end of the year. And like, things like small things like that. Mm-hmm. I even talk about, like just practical small things. Don't set up 1-hour meetings, set up 45 or 50-minute meetings, because that 10 minutes in between helps you just even process what you just experienced in that 1 hour and gives you a bathroom break. It gives you time to decompress, get some water, or just process, right? Before you go to the next thing. So those things,
or in some really instances, like literally stand up and stretch your leg. You may have been back to back for hours. Yeah, no, I'm feeling you. And if we transition the mindset into the thought process of a small business owner, someone who may have had that upstart and just worked so incredibly hard to create the business, but maybe ignored the culture a little bit. And let's say they're coming back around, right? And now they're in the process of saying, I need to not just fix this, but I'm really going to invest in baking this in and making sustainable well-being part of my mission. So then from that small business owner's perspective, do you have any advice on turning that tide and changing the perspective of the way that you're perceived as a small business, reframed in wellness?
Wow. That's a great question.
I have an answer. I have an answer.
Oh, go ahead.
I just actually got off the phone with a client of this right before we got on here. And, folks, consider employee engagement surveys. They could be specific to, promotions. They could be specific to benefits. They could be specific, in this case, to sustainable well-being. They could be all of it. But I just want to say, do not do an employee survey of any type whatsoever unless you actually plan on taking action, which means, as you mentioned before, Teany, is if the C-suite is not bought into it, then don't do it.
Right. I agree.
It's
a little different. It's a little different when it's a small business because there's less, top executives. They're more hands-on, which is actually great. It's actually a great thing. It's an opportunity. I think that is often missed. They want to act like they're, the C-suite, and often they are very disconnected from their employees. But in small businesses, that's the biggest opportunity to actually be at the level with the employee, to be able to connect with them on a more personal level and understand what their needs are. So the survey that you mentioned is an amazing way to do it. If you're going to take action, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not just for small businesses. That's for any size business. Yeah. Big businesses have their problems. Small businesses have their problem. But I have to tell you, majority of our employees right now, especially in 2025, are burnt out because of so much, we'll just say it, drama coming at them internally from the workplace and then externally as well. And worry. I mean, let's talk about that, Teany, is that fact that so many employees are just worried about everything, where they're going to get their next paycheck, and how is our company doing? There's layoffs going on in places that we would have never in a million years thought there'd be layoffs going on. And so many people that never really had to worry about potential job loss, how am I going to pay my rent or my mortgage, are now worried about that. Any advice on how we can, communicate with our employees to help them feel better without lying to them, but keeping them calm and letting them know this is where we're at right now in our company?
I'm glad you asked that. So years back when we were having, riots and people were picketing, I don't know if you guys remember that, years back, I spoke to my boss and I said, there's a lot of craziness happening right now, but we're not talking about it. And I don't know you, but I started taking 3-day weekends. Like I literally would take every Friday off because it took that much time for me to decompress from the madness that was going on in the world and the madness that was going on during the week for work. So if there's anything they should start doing is having open conversations about what's actually happening in the world. Like, this is, not to get into the politics of it, but at least to name it, right? To talk about the elephant in the room and ask them, how are you doing based on all this? Is there anything that we can do to support you? Self-awareness, nervous system safety and support. We've got your backs here. We're here to serve. We're here to support you, creating that workplace culture, talking about the elephant in the room. Nobody does that and talks about that,
Yeah. And I would also encourage you, how do I put this the best way possible, is get an expert involved when you are trying to figure out, to talk about that elephant in the room. And for everybody that is listening, that expert is going to be somebody different for your industry. It could be a consultant, It could be your marketing officer, but I would make sure that you're getting some opinions from outside of the organization, because we often get into groupthink inside the organization. Like, oh, our employees are fine. They know what's going on. It's like, nah, not really. Even when things are going amazing and there's no burnout, which there's always somebody burnt out a little bit because of things that are going on in their life. But even when things are going amazing for companies and employees and the economy and no layoffs, and the only thing we're worried about is we can't find enough of employees versus we can't find enough jobs, we still have a ton of miscommunication within our organization. For whatever reason, HR, I'm going to blame us too, managers, executives, were like, oh yeah, we're all on the same page. We're rarely on the same page, right?
Yep. That's very true. Very true.
Employees who feel that their organization cares about their well-being, they're 69% less likely to actively search for a new job and 71% less likely to report burnout. And 70% of employees say they still feel burned out after taking a vacation. So it does underscore the need for a systemic, not just individual solution. And of course, it might be HR's problem. Wendy, back to you.
As the HR lady, I 100% agree with that. I want to talk a little bit more about, burnout relief, and long-term thrive. So we've talked a lot about the negatives here, but now we got to turn around into the solutions, right? So burnout for relief is great if you could figure out what that is and what it's going to work for your company, your budget, and then for your employees. But many of you that are listening today, you may not have your company to back you up. You may need to handle this on your own as well. So what keeps people like in the thrive zone for the long haul? Any tips for making resilience stick, not just a quick fix?
So many things, Wendy, so many things. So one thing I will say is that it depends on the individual. I do a lot of assessments through human design, Enneagrams and things like that, where I can understand people better and sort of target. I do this a lot, actually, even on social media. I'm like, tell me your HD and I'll tell you what actually works for your type, because there's not one solution for everyone. But I will say that one thing is in common for all. And that is a deeper meaning and purpose in everyday things. So it's the job and the career. Yes. Okay. But that's so like heavy, right? Like, oh my God, finding the career of your dreams. It's like, that's a lifelong thing, right? Like that. And that can change also over time. But if you can find meaning in even the small mundane things, and obviously gratitude is a big one too, those things will help you carry through the day, right? And then long term, if you can find a more sustainable purpose in life, that will help you through your lifetime. So, and then there's obviously a lot of, things, tricks, tips and things that I talk to people about, depending on, again, their personality type and all those different things that work for them personally. So,
yeah, and I actually saw on your website that you have 5 burnout relief hacks. So folks, make sure you check that out as well. I'll make sure that we put in this podcast notes, the website, and then your LinkedIn as well. But before we, get closer to wrapping up here, what's like one myth about burnout relief you wish everybody would stop believing?
Okay, I'll tell you one myth, and then I'll tell you one thing that you can do every single day that will work for everyone. One myth is that that burnout comes from just one stressful event. I mentioned this in the beginning of our talk, and that's just not the case. And the more you own that label, the more you're going to actually draw more of that into your life, because your focus of the energy goes where your focus goes, right? So if you're focusing on all the bad things and all the stresses and all the things, then you're just going to find more of it, because that's just how the brain works, right? It's not even a woo spiritual thing. That's literally how the brain works. The brain is a problem solver. So that's the one thing. One stressful event does not equate to burnout. That's the big one. And then in terms of like one thing that you can do every day that I think will work for the majority of people that will support
I'm listening.
You ready? Is some level of sensory deprivation. So one thing that I actually do when I'm in a stressful moment or a stressful situation or a stressful day or whatever is and I'll tell you what the workplace version of this is and what the home version of this. So if you're home, you have a lot more leeway because you can go anywhere. So if you go to your bedroom, blackout curtains, earplugs. I like to listen to binaural beats because it helps balance the brain. But if you can just be in silence and reduce the external information that your brain has to process, that already is one step in the direction of helping you decompress. Now, if you're in an office space, what I used to do is I used to go to the bathroom And I'd go to one of those single bathrooms and I just lock the door, turn the lights off, and just sit there if you can sit down, or even just stand against the wall, because having pressure against your back also is a supportive energy for your body. It helps balance the nervous system. So just even that, and just being with your eyes closed in the dark, or with as much silence as you can get, to deprive yourself of too much sensory input, will just help you get back into yourself and back into your body immediately.
I love that. Absolutely love that. In fact, right before we got on, maybe an hour before we got on today to record this, I saw that one of my best friend, turned off Instagram, and I texted her, "Hey, you okay? I saw you're off Instagram." And she said, "I'm burnt out and I cannot have this distraction right now. It's dragging me down a hole." And I was like, "Oh boy, I should probably do the same thing."
Yeah. I mean, we're in like hypersensory overload with like all the things that are happening in the world, plus work, plus family, plus friends, plus, all the things added together. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Awesome. Well, this has been so great. JC, any final words?
No, this is absolutely fantastic. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Hey, how can people connect with you?
I'm everywhere at this point, but I try not to overwhelm myself, pun intended. But the best place is probably on LinkedIn. You've probably seen, I have a newsletter there. And actually, a lot of HR folks tend to follow me there. And I give them tips. I have a whole guide that I offer as well, with tons of tips that you probably have never even heard before. Aside from the whole sensory deprivation, there's tons of other things that you can do depending on your type. But LinkedIn would probably be the best place. I'm also on Instagram. So
excellent. I will make sure that we put your LinkedIn profile in the podcast notes. Thank you so much for this information. You've definitely given me, if you've known it or not, a little bit of homework to do for myself, because I am also amongst the feeling burnt out crowd right now. So really, truly, thank you. Everyone else, I hope this podcast session has been beneficial to you. This is a reminder, once again, that if you listen to this podcast via the HR Empowerment website, you also get SHRM and HRCI credits. Simply go to auroratrainingadvantage.com and look for the podcast tab and sign in there. Take care, everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.